Today on the Matt Walsh Show, Tim Walz is funding a program in Minnesota that brings children out into the woods to talk about sexuality. But don't worry, we're assured that there's nothing weird about it at all. Also, Donald Trump brutally roasts Kamala and the Democrats at the Al Smith dinner last night. A megachurch pastor has a very, shall we say, unhelpful message for Christians leading into the election. And a white dude for Harris tries his best to diagnose his party's problems with male voters. He gets so close to the answer, yet so far. All of that and more today on the Matt Walsh Show. On October 28th, my new movie, Am I Racist?, the #1 documentary of the decade, will be streaming exclusively on Daily Wire Plus. Get ready right now. Go to dailywire.com/subscribe. Use code DEI for 35% off new annual memberships right now. What is a wireless company? No, it shouldn't be a big data company. No, it shouldn't be a political action campaign. And no, a wireless company shouldn't make you believe you only have two options for data, unlimited or unlimited, and both are stupidly expensive. A wireless company, pure and simple, should connect you to the people and things you love. A wireless company should give you lightning-fast 5G coverage at a lower cost than you're paying today. And a wireless company should have an excellent customer service team based right here in America who can help make switching easy. Essentially, all wireless companies should be like Pure Talk, but unfortunately they're not. So you should switch right now. And if you do at puretalk.com/Walsh, you'll also get 1 year free of Daily Wire Plus, where you can stream my new film, Am I Racist?, for free starting October 28th, where I'll be debunking yet another leftist myth. But remember, the deal is exclusive. The only way to get it is by going to puretalk.com/Walsh. Support Pure Talk, a wireless company who wants to be a wireless company and nothing more. And here's the kicker. They also support the same values you do. And remember, it takes courage to stand for your values and takes even more to stand against those who try to silence you. puretalk.com/Walsh. That's puretalk.com/Walsh. You know, there are a lot of ways you could measure the profound changes that have taken place in this country over the past century. You could talk about the civil rights movement, which pretty much everyone on the left does constantly all the time. You could talk about the growth of our GDP and the stock market. Or you could talk about our many technological advancements in aviation and spaceflight and computing and so on. Plenty of people talk about those achievements too. What's less discussed are our views about nature and the environment. I'm not talking about the politics of man-made global warming, quote unquote, or all the junk science behind it. I'm talking about our view of nature as a totally non-political concept. That has changed also, and not for the better. When he was president, Teddy Roosevelt doubled the number of national parks, made the Grand Canyon a national monument, established hundreds of millions of acres of protected public land. He became known as the conservation president because he inspired an entire generation to become outdoorsmen. And he didn't do any of these things to advance any kind of political agenda, really. He did it because a healthy society recognizes that nature is worth protecting and worth enjoying for its own sake. And both Democrats and Republicans respected that. Well, a little over a century later, we don't have politicians like Teddy Roosevelt anymore. In fact, the government is trying to erase his legacy to the extent possible. They've taken down his statues because he was supposedly a racist. And in the place of leaders like Teddy Roosevelt, we have now politicians like Tim Walz, the governor of Minnesota, who's now running to be the vice president of the United States. Tim Walz, unlike Teddy Roosevelt, and really he's unlike Teddy Roosevelt in every conceivable way, but also this, that he views nature as a means to a political end. Like so many other politicians, he sees the environment as just another part of the all-encompassing total state, as just another avenue to indoctrinate as many people as possible, particularly young people, into the most perverse and deranged excesses of left-wing ideology. Now, yesterday, my team and I broke the news about a particularly disturbing program that the state of Minnesota, under Tim Walz, recently funded. And here's how it works. The Minnesota Department of Natural Resources operates something called the No Child Left Inside program. The idea of No Child Left Inside, which has been around for more than a decade, is that young people shouldn't spend all of their time indoors. They should, get away from the screens and go out hiking and ice fishing and bird watching, et cetera, and learn something about nature. And as part of this program, the Minnesota government gives grants to organize to organizations that promise to facilitate these kinds of outdoor excursions to get kids out into the great outdoors. and off of the phones and TVs and everything. So far, so good. You know, most of us would agree with that kids should be outside more often. And as skeptical as many of us are about government spending, hey, you know, having some programs to get kids outside, I think that's worth spending money on. The problem is that because politicians like Tim Walz believe that their ideology must be promoted everywhere and at all times, these No Child Left Inside grants aren't just going to organizations that facilitate hikes and birdwatching and fishing. Instead, they're going to organizations that want to get young children between the ages of 11 and 17 alone in the woods where adults who identify as trans can talk to them in private about topics like queerness and nature without their parents present, of course. Quoting from the Daily Wire, Spencer Lindquist, quote, "The Minnesota Department of Natural Resources gave $10,500 to Clean River Partners, which sponsors the Queer Unity Environmental Education and Recreation for Youth program, aka Query. Led by a woman named Heron, a self-described trans, non-binary naturalist, youth educator, and community engagement professional who uses they/them pronouns, the group convenes monthly to offer a safe space for young individuals to connect, learn outdoor skills, and explore the intersection of queerness and nature." An Instagram post advertising the program states. According to Heron, parents are asked to not attend the events, so participants have the chance to build their independence outdoors. For the record, here's a picture of Heron, the they/them who wants to spend some time alone in nature with children as young as 11 years old without their parents present. Now, some of the topics that Heron reportedly wants to chat about include examples of queerness in nature, which will supposedly make these children more comfortable with their identity, whatever that means exactly. And this is what Tim Walz's Minnesota is spending taxpayers' money on. Some of these examples of queerness in nature, by the way, include female wood frogs, sex-changing tadpoles, mushrooms with different sex types, and so on. And this relates to a familiar argument that trans activists often use, even though it's never made any sense, where they say, well, look at this species of plant or animal that changes sex. Therefore, transgenderism is valid. Well, there's an obvious difference between a tadpole that undergoes natural physical changes throughout its life and a human who, quote unquote, identifies as a different gender or who makes the voluntary decision to remove body parts. The tadpole is undergoing a natural process that alters its body. A human who cuts off body parts is not undergoing a natural process. It's like saying you can make a trans butterfly. Yes, a caterpillar can become a butterfly. That doesn't mean that we can paste wings on the caterpillar and make it into a butterfly whenever we want. And also, the key difference here is that human beings are human. They are not caterpillars or tadpoles. And so it doesn't make any sense to say, well, look, the tadpole can do it. That means I can. There are a lot of things tadpoles do that you can't do and shouldn't try to do. Now, obviously, anyone who says the opposite shouldn't be alone with 11-year-old children without parental supervision. But this trans-binary naturalist, quote unquote, says there's no cause for alarm because there will be plenty of adult supervision on these excursions, which are an ongoing monthly thing. For example, there will also be a college student in attendance who serves on the board of a student-run drag organization, and this college student uses he, they pronouns and appears to be a female who's had her breasts removed. So, rest easy, parents. Your child is in good hands at Query. Just send them off into the woods with these people. The Daily Wire reached out to this organization and the state of Minnesota to figure out exactly what's going on here. The organization's director claimed that, quote, parents aren't banned from attending the program, but it is meant to be a space for youth and it's designed as such. She added that the program is intended to promote a sense of safety and belonging in the outdoors for queer and questioning youth. With discussion topics including trail navigation, plant identification, and paddling skills. Okay, well, what exactly do trail navigation, plant identification, and paddling have to do with children who say that they're gay or quote-unquote non-binary? I mean, that's a question that definitely would have confused Teddy Roosevelt not too long ago. But to Tim Walz, it's not confusing. I mean, this is how grooming works. You surround confused children with gender ideology at all times. You tell them that everything in the world, even plant identification, relates back to their perceived sexuality. Now, for their part, the state of Minnesota gave us a predictably useless bureaucratic answer to our questions about this program. First, they told us that, quote, "It is our understanding that parents can participate in the program." So they just dodged the whole issue of whether parents are being pressured not to attend. And then the government spokesman told us that the Department of Natural Resources, quote, "funded this project because it scored highly on a rubric-based assessment that took into account program focus, design, approach, and evaluation, feasibility, and financial need and match." Now, whenever you hear terms like rubric-based assessment, you know that you've descended to the sixth circle of bureaucratic hell. I mean, you don't need a rubric to know that it's a terrible idea to have adults taking children out into the woods to talk to their, without their parents about queerness. As a general rule, it is never a good sign when adults are trying to lure children into the woods to discuss sexuality. And you don't need any special rubric to know that. You just need common sense. But bureaucracy exists to provide plausible deniability when people disregard common sense in order to advance an agenda. It exists to provide cover for programs like Query. And when they're called out for what they're doing, they hide behind the rubric. That's the strategy that Tim Walz has decided upon. I could go through the many other examples of depraved programs that Tim Walz has either endorsed or overseen in Minnesota. There was his legislation removing the requirement that doctors provide life-saving care to children who survive abortions. We've already talked at length about his bill that requires high schools to put tampons in the boys' bathroom. Tim Walz's wife recently doubled down on that bill, by the way. She suggested that it was just common sense. Watch.
What else do we need in schools? And as we listened, people were having trouble accessing feminine products. And so Tim made those available in schools. I think that makes sense. I'm focused on learning. So is Tim. So is our legislature. And so we said, if this is something that distracts from learning, well, then we're going to take care of that. Why wouldn't we? Because we're interested in students learning and not being distracted by other things.
Well, as we've seen time and time again, these people calling J.D. Vance weird was one of the most flagrant examples of projection in all of modern politics. They accuse you of exactly what they're guilty of. Any reasonable person can take one look at Tim Walz and come to that conclusion. You can read his policies. You can look at how he behaves at his rallies. It's actually striking how strange and just viscerally disturbing this guy is. And at the same time, within the Democratic Party, Tim Walz isn't weird at all by their standards. He embodies everything that the party stands for. And in particular, he stands for the idea that everything, even outdoor activities like trail navigation and plant identification, should be used as an opportunity to indoctrinate as many children as possible. This is an ideology that seeks to corrupt everything it touches. It's what Tim Walz has brought to the state of Minnesota. And even if you're not especially political, even if you don't care at all, if you just care at all about preserving sane, non-political spaces in this country, well, that's reason enough to make sure that he never gets anywhere near the White House. Now let's get to our 5 headlines. Let's talk about something that affects all of us, unfortunately, taxes. The October 15th deadline has passed, and if you're not prepared, you could be in for a world of hurt. Do you owe back taxes? Are your returns still unfiled? Did you miss the deadline to file for an extension? Now that we're past October 15th, the IRS is probably gearing up for some aggressive enforcement. Trust me, you don't want to be on their radar. We're talking wage garnishments, frozen bank accounts, or even property seizures. It's not pretty, folks, but before you start panicking, there's still hope. Tax Network USA has helped taxpayers save over $1 billion in tax debt and filed over 10,000 tax returns. These guys specialize in reducing tax burdens for hardworking Americans just like you. Look, I get it. Dealing with the IRS is about as fun as a root canal, but ignoring the problem won't make it go away. So here's what you need to do. Don't wait any longer. For a complimentary consultation, call today at 1-800-958-1000 or visit their website at tnusa.com/Walsh. Their experts will walk you through a few simple questions to see how much you can save. That's 1-800-958-1000 or visit tnusa.com/Walsh today. Don't let the IRS take advantage of you. Get the help you need with Tax Network USA. The Al Smith dinner was back last night. That's the annual dinner in New York, hosted by the Archdiocese that's supposed to raise money for Catholic charities. During presidential elections, of course, the tradition is that candidates show up and kind of roast each other Speeches are supposed to be funny. I think they didn't do it in 2020 because of COVID. So it was back in 2024. Now, I do have to admit, not to be the wet blanket here, which I would never be. I don't really like this event or events like it. The White House Correspondents' Dinner is another one. I mean, I'm fine with the event. With the event itself, if the Archdiocese wants to have a dinner where they raise money for charity and have a good laugh and a nice time, that's fine. I got no problem with that. My problem is that they usually invite, as I said, the presidential candidates, including the Democrat presidential candidate and other high-ranking Democrats. They're usually at this event. But Democrat politicians just should not be invited to come to events like this and joke around and have a good time, considering they all support abortion and their entire political platform is a rejection of Catholic teaching. So I don't think they should be involved in any Catholic event. Now, if they want to come to church and repent of their sins, then absolutely they should come. If they want to come to confess their sins, if they want to come to the confessional and confess their sins, then they should. But, a dinner where everyone's joking and palling around and all that kind of stuff, and it's being filmed and it's out there in public. I just think that the Democrat Party at this point is so horrifically evil that you just can't. It's kind of scandalous. To have a bishop or a cardinal, palling around with Chuck Schumer and Nancy Pelosi at a swanky dinner. It just doesn't look right. So that's my issues with the events in general. But the good news is that the dinner did provide Trump, who Trump showed up. Kamala Harris was invited. She didn't show up. We'll get to her in a second. But Trump was there, and it did provide an opportunity to deliver some roasts. And these really are some of the most brutal jokes I think we've ever heard from a presidential candidate. It was pretty great. So we've got a few clips here. We'll go through some of the highlights from Trump's stand-up routine, I guess. Here it is.
I'd like to thank our MC this evening, Jim Gaffigan. Most recently, Jim has been playing Tim Walz on Saturday Night Live. And that'll be a very short gig, I hope, Jim. But it was fun while it lasted, wasn't it? Let's see how that lasts. It better be quick. We don't want him, and I'm not going to say anymore. But unfortunately, Governor Walz isn't here himself, but don't worry, he'll say that he was. He's going to say he was. Coming in very, very strong, a certain way. I won't tell you what way that is, but Chuck Schumer is here looking very glum. Doesn't he look glum? He looks glum. But look on the bright side, Chuck, considering how woke your party has become. If Kamala loses, you still have a chance to become the first woman president. A major issue in this race is child care, and Kamala has put forward a concept of a plan. A lot of people don't like it. The only piece of advice I would have for her in the event that she wins would be not to let her husband, Doug, anywhere near the nannies. Just keep him away. That's a nasty one. That's nasty. There's a group called White Dudes for Harris. Have you seen this? White Dudes for Harris. Anybody know? Are some of you here? White Dudes for Harris? Doesn't sound like it. But I'm not worried about them at all because their wives and their wives' lovers are all voting for me. Every one of those people is voting for me.
So that's some that last one and the one about the nanny. That's brutal. That is great. It's brutal and great. I don't know what's funnier, the jokes or watching Chuck Schumer sitting there scowling the whole time. It's it's good. Now, as I said, I don't think he should be there. I don't think he should be there at all at any kind of Catholic event until he repents of his his support for the mass slaughter of infants, among other evils. But it is great to see that juxtaposition. And listening to those clips, it does give me some optimism for a potential next Trump administration, because what you hope is that if Trump were to win, that he'll get into office and like a man with nothing to lose, out for revenge, ready to tear the establishment to pieces, drain the swamp, set it on fire, metaphorically speaking. The guy just doesn't care at all, and that's what you hope for. Doesn't mean we're actually going to get it, but you hope for it. And seeing those clips, though, I mean, they're just jokes that he's delivering at a charity dinner, obviously, but that certainly comes across like a guy who just doesn't give a damn. And at this point, and you can kind of feel that energy in those jokes. So let's hope it carries over. Let's keep that same energy. Kamala Harris, for her part, was invited, as I said, but she didn't show up. And instead, she submitted a video to be played at the event. And this video it's rough. I mean, I got to tell you, it is. I've seen like snuff videos that pop up in my Twitter feed that are less grotesque and difficult to watch than this. I mean, it's bad. I'm warning you. If you haven't seen it, I'm warning you ahead of time, because I am, of course, now going to subject you to it. Here it is.
Your Eminence and distinguished guests, the Al Smith dinner provides a rare opportunity to set aside partisanship.
Oh, sorry.
Hey, what's going on? Who was that?
Oh, sorry, Mary Catherine Elliott. Mary Catherine Elliott. It's so nice to meet you.
Very nice to meet you, Mary Catherine. Right now I'm trying to record my speech for tonight's dinner.
Oh, yeah, I know. I just want to say that I'm Catholic, and tonight is one of the biggest dinners next to the Last Supper.
It is a very important dinner, and it's an important tradition that I'm so proud to be a part of.
Sometimes when I get nervous, I stick my fingers under my arms and I simmer them like that. But that's gross.
So tell me something. I'm giving a speech. Do you have some thoughts about what I might say tonight?
My feelings about what you should say tonight would be best expressed in a monologue from one of my favorite made-for-TV series.
Okay, let's hear it.
Don't you see, man? We need a woman to represent us. A woman brings more heart, more compassion. And think how smart she must be to become a top contender in a field dominated by men. It's time for a woman, bro. And with this woman, we can fly.
What series was that from?
Oh, that's from House of Dragons, now streaming on HBO Max.
Is there anything that you think that maybe I shouldn't bring up tonight?
Well, don't lie. Thou shalt not bear false witness to thy neighbor.
Indeed, especially thy neighbor's election results.
Just so you know, there will be a fact checker there tonight.
Oh, that's great. Who?
Jesus. And maybe don't say anything negative about Catholics.
I would never do that, no matter where I was. That would be like criticizing Detroit in Detroit.
Does it bother you that Trump guy insults you all the time? Because it really bothers me.
Okay, stop. That was the worst thing ever put to film. It was the worst thing that's ever happened. It's so unfunny that it amounts to an act of treason. I think that Kamala Harris should be disqualified, thrown in federal prison, really, for that skit. I mean, that's how bad it was. Where do you even begin? Where do you begin with it? How do you pick that apart? Everything about it was bad. Nothing worked. Not one line landed. The whole premise is just lame. Why are you digging up an SNL character from 30 years ago? Why is that the bit? Was Molly Shannon just there and they said she just happened to be hanging out and they're like, well, she's here. Let's throw her into it. It shows how out of touch Kamala's campaign is, not only with comedy and modern entertainment, but with Catholics. Like, I guess they were trying to think of something that would be funny to Catholics, and the only thing they could think of was this Catholic schoolgirl SNL character from 1995. Now, of course, the woman who playing the character is now like 60, so it makes it extremely weird. And it was a bit that was barely funny on SNL. It had already died in 1999 when they made a whole movie around this character. and it was a total flop. And that was 25 years ago, and yet they're going back to that well now. Because they just couldn't think of any other like Catholic cultural reference they could make. This is the best they could come up with. I saw some Catholics on social media saying that they were kind of offended by this skit because it was disrespectful to Catholics and all that. But really, come on, like, don't dignify this by saying it was offensive. Don't do that. You are giving it too much credit to say that it was offensive. It was way, way too toothless and lame and cringy to be offensive. Anyway. I'm not going to make too much of it. I mean, I just said Kamala should go to federal prison for it, but you could argue that makes too much of it. But either way, this bad skit isn't going to lose her the election. A lot of other stuff might lose her the election, but it does go to show that first of all, Kamala is completely out of touch, and also that she has just no sense of humor, which is not a surprise. She's a 60-year-old liberal woman, not exactly a demographic renowned for its comedic chops. But even so, you can tell a lot about somebody based on their sense of humor or lack thereof. I don't judge people for not being funny themselves. Most people aren't funny, but you should be able to recognize at some basic level what is funny and what isn't. And if you don't have that ability, I do kind of judge you for that. Not kind of, I do judge you for that very harshly. And I think it says a lot about you. None of it good. And this is, perfect example right here. All right, New York Post has this. President Biden griped to former President Barack Obama that, quote, she is, quote, not as strong as me, with Obama agreeing. That's true. In a stunning off-mic conversation deciphered for the Post by a professional lip reader. The apparent candid assessment of Vice President Kamala Harris's standing going into the November 5th election occurred Wednesday afternoon as America's two most recent Democratic presidents conversed at Ethel Kennedy's memorial service in Washington. Biden said, according to the translation, she's not as strong as me, which was and the translation was produced by analyzing the on-video lip movements during the discussion. Biden said, Obama said, I know that's true. We have time. We'll get it in time. Moments earlier, Obama said it's important that we have some time together, in a possible reference to campaigning alongside Harris. The dialogue was translated for the Post by Jeremy Freeman, a London-based forensic lip reader who was born deaf and for 16 years has served as a University College London certified expert witness for litigants, the police, and journalists. Okay, so that's what the lip readers say was going on in this clip. And we could play the clip for you, but if you're listening in audio, there's no audio, so you wouldn't be able to hear it. Now, you have to ask yourself, do you think they didn't know that this conversation that they had would get out and that people would know what they were talking about? I mean, they're having it in full view of news cameras. Now, maybe they didn't realize that the New York Post would go out and hire a forensic lip reader to translate what they said, which is hilarious. But still, like, you're having this conversation about this subject in full view of cameras. I don't think it comes as a shock to them that the content of that conversation is getting out. But the second thing is, assuming that this is what they were actually saying, and that Biden did say, I'm a stronger candidate than she is. I think that Biden's actually right about that. As it turns out that Biden was right all along, I think. He is the better candidate. He is the stronger candidate. Now, yeah, he's senile and totally ineffectual and incapacitated, and he's been a horrible president. And all of that is true. But he's probably the stronger candidate, actually, on second thought. Kamala got a nice boost for a few weeks when she entered the race because it was something different, not that different, it turns out, not really different at all. But she got a nice boost. But now she's really doing no better than Biden would have been doing probably at this point, and maybe doing worse. Which again is not a statement about Biden's strengths, but rather about Kamala's profound weaknesses. So, And a lot of us, even on the right, a lot of conservatives, we said, I said that, hey, they got to get rid of Biden. They're going to have to. They have no choice. Like they can't. There's no way they're going to lose if they try to go to November with him. And anybody would be better than him. That's what a lot of us, even conservatives, were saying. And if all that commentary from conservatives at all had any influence on the decision makers in the Democrat Party who decided to push Biden out, well, hey, sorry guys, I think we, oops, sorry about that. I think you had it right the first time, turns out. We didn't mean to mislead you in any way. Sorry. But you're stuck. You're stuck with her now. You can't switch back. That would be great if they tried to switch back. That would be the funniest thing that's ever happened in human history if they tried to switch back, but they can't. So they are stuck with her. And I think that the problem for the Democrats is that they went with a half measure. There's that famous monologue from Breaking Bad where Mike Ehrmantraut, Gus's the henchman of the bad guy, gives this speech to Walter White where he talks about no more half measures. And I think if I'm remembering the monologue correctly, he talks about a time when there was a guy that was beating up, when he was a cop, and there was a guy that was beating up his wife, and he kind of took the guy aside and maybe beat him up a little bit and said, don't do that to your wife anymore. And the next thing you know, he kills his wife. And so Mike's takeaway is that, well, we should have just taken that guy out. We did a half measure, and we needed to do a full measure. So that's the problem for the Democrats, is that they went with a half measure instead of a full measure, because the full measure would have been, once you kick out Biden and you kick him to the curb, to kick out Kamala along with him. And they didn't want to do that because they were worried about the politics of it. They were worried about what it would look like to prevent a black woman from becoming the first female president and all the rest of it. So even though they knew better. I mean, the reports told us early on that Obama, who according to the reports was behind this coup against Biden, that he knew that Kamala was a really weak candidate, probably worse than Biden. So he wanted it to go to an open convention, which would have been unprecedented. That would have been like a crazy thing. It hasn't happened in modern history. And that would have been probably chaos. But you're already doing an unprecedented, crazy, historic thing. So you might as well just go the whole way, do the full measure. And the coup should be against both of them. And you go and you find somebody else, someone else entirely, because this is what it turned out that Biden, very weak candidate, terrible candidate, for all the reasons that we all know. But it's not that anyone would be better than him. Almost anyone would be better for the Democrats than Biden. Kamala was one of the few who actually would not be better than Biden. And so of all the potential options, there's like millions of other people that would have, just because they're someone else. Like really anyone who was not in the administration would have been probably a better choice than Biden. And so that leaves up really potentially millions of options of who they could have chosen. And they went with one of the few who was not better. Megan Basham is an excellent reporter here at the Daily Wire, posted this yesterday on her Twitter. Says, last week, Matt Chandler, megachurch pastor and head of the massive church planting network Acts 29, gave a sermon on politics. In it, he pushed the false narrative peddled by progressives that the only reason the GOP took up the issue of abortion was because they were losing elections, developed a strategy in the 70s to co-opt us and make Christians their people. He goes on to say, the GOP, no, we're easily manipulated. We're easily worked into a frenzy. We can be controlled by them. They don't all believe what we believe. This is a strategy. He does then call out, this is Megan Basham again, he does then call out the left for their pro-abortion policies, which he calls morally reprehensible, but the overall upshot of his sermon recycles the old both sides are bad shtick. He specifically stresses that he does not trust Trump. So this is a sermon from, as you said, Matt Chandler is a very influential megachurch pastor, talking politics. Here we are, really, just a couple of weeks before the election. Here's, we'll play a quick clip of that sermon. Here it is.
In 1972, go read their charter. Not a single word about God or abortion in there. They were losing elections. They developed a strategy in the 70s to co-opt us and make us their people. They know we're easily manipulated. We are easily worked into a frenzy. We can be controlled by them. And that's what they did. And they are not for us. They do not all believe what we believe. This is a strategy. So I feel used by them. When they talk about us and to us, I feel in my guts like, get my name out of your mouth. You do not represent me.
Okay. So he's talking about the Republican Party there. And it is true that the Republican Party started focusing on abortion a lot more around 1972 or 1973, thereabouts. And which is interesting because it's almost like something happened, some kind of major event occurred relating to the abortion issue. It's almost like, Roe v. Wade. Roe v. Wade was decided in 1973. Was argued in 1972, decided in 1973. That's what made it into the major political issue that it would become. So Chandler sees this as some kind of sinister conspiracy theory, but the reason that the Republican Party made opposition to Roe into a crucial part of its platform in 1973, and it wasn't part of the platform before that, is that Roe didn't exist before that. So that's why. Pretty simple. But putting that little technical point to the side, I will say this, more of a general comment, that as we get closer to the election, it's true that if you're a Christian, and we've heard this, I hear this from Christians all the time, that, the Republican Party doesn't own my vote. Yeah, absolutely, you're right. They don't own your vote. No political party does. It's true that the Republican Party has a lot of serious problems. It's true that Trump has problems. There are plenty of things about either and both the Republican Party and Trump that I don't agree with or that I wish were different, mostly relating to me wishing that they were farther to the right on a lot of these kinds of issues. But we don't really have time to sit around pontificating about that sort of thing right now at this moment. Like at this moment in time, this is not the time for it. Yeah, if you're a pro-life Christian, you don't owe your vote to the Republicans. It's not, your vote is not a thing that they gave to you on loan or something and you have to return it to them. But you are morally obligated to vote against a party that endorses, funds, and facilitates the slaughter of the unborn. We are morally obliged to oppose that with all our might. There are plenty of other reasons to oppose the Democrat Party, but you don't really need any additional reasons on top of this. The Democrat Party endorses, funds, facilitates, and celebrates the mass slaughter of the unborn. I mean, it's that simple. Now, the Republican Party is largely too moderate on this issue for my taste. I'd like for them to be a lot more hardcore about their pro-life principles, but there really is no comparison between the two. Republicans, at a minimum, we can say that the Republican Party, Donald Trump, do not wish to actively increase the number of abortions that are performed. I mean, that's a pretty low bar, but like at a minimum, we could say that. Whereas the Democrat side of it, that is what they want to do. They want more of this thing. They want to create more of it. And those become the choices. I mean, it's like choosing between, if the Republican Party is serving you a meal that isn't as nutritious as it should be, isn't as filling, isn't as healthy and substantive as you want it to be. But then on the other hand, the Democrats are serving you literal poison. And you could choose between the two plates, or you could have nothing and you could starve. Like, that's the other thing. Starvation's also an option. Starvation and poison will have the same effect, though, ultimately. Not the best analogy, I'll admit, but it's still, the point is, as Christians, as pro-lifers, and especially if you're a pastor leading a flock, like, this is not a time for the both sides routine and all of that. And when we talk about this, I also have to constantly remind everyone, and it shouldn't be the thing we have to remind people, especially Christians and pro-lifers, because this should be ever present in our mind, but it's not. So people do need to be reminded that Kamala Harris, it's not just that she wants to kill more babies, though she does. This administration is right now, as we speak, actively waging war on the pro-life movement. They are putting pro-lifers in prison, in federal prison for years. That is happening right now. It's been happening. They're currently doing it. This is not I'm not warning you that it will happen in the future. This is some sort of hypothetical future scenario that we should be concerned about. It's like, no, it's happening right now. And Kamala Harris not only is involved in that with this administration, but this is what she did when she was Attorney General of California. When she talks about how she was putting bad guys in prison in when she was in California, what she forgets to mention is that for her, the bad guys were like pro-life activists and journalists who were exposing criminal activity in Planned Parenthood, at Planned Parenthood. So if she is elected, or if she ends up president, whether she's elected or not, this legal warfare against pro-lifers will only be ramped up. I mean, we've only just seen the tip of the iceberg. Is there a both sides thing there? Like, is anyone going to really tell me, what, you think Trump's going to do that? Are we worried about, but Trump will be just as bad. Really? You think Trump's going to send his DOJ after pro-lifers to throw them in jail? Like, does anyone think that's going to happen? Of course not. So that's another. I mean, that also is. There are so many other reasons to vote against her, to actively oppose her, and to stop with the both sides thing. But that's another reason that even on its own, even that all by itself, should be enough. Natural disasters are becoming more frequent and devastating, folks. From the Maui fires to Hurricane Helene, we're seeing entire towns wiped out in 24 hours with barely any warning. And what happens? People are left without basic resources, scrambling to survive. Now, I know what you're thinking. It won't happen here. That's exactly what everyone thinks until they're in the middle of a catastrophe. Being prepared isn't just smart, it's essential. That's where the wellness company's emergency kits come in. These aren't your run-of-the-mill first aid kits. We're talking about a personalized mini pharmacy right in your own home. No more relying on overworked doctors or understocked pharmacies when disaster strikes. Bacterial infections, staph, bite wounds, UTIs, strep throat, respiratory illnesses. These kits have you covered. It's like having a doctor in your pocket, minus the liberal indoctrination from med school. Look, you can keep a fire extinguisher handy, can't you? Well, consider this your medical fire extinguisher. It's not paranoia, it's preparedness. Here's how it works. Just fill out a form online, a pharmacist reviews it, and boom, your kit arrives in 2 weeks. Even comes with a medical board-approved guidebook. It's that simple. And right now, when you go to urgentcarekit.com/Walsh and use promo code Walsh, you'll save $60. Plus, get free shipping. That's urgentcarekit.com/Walsh to save $60. This is preparedness simplified. Invest in your family's self-managed insurance plan today. urgentcarekit.com/Walsh, USA residents only. In just 10 days, my hit comedy, Am I Racist, is coming to Daily Wire Plus. That's right, October 28th is your first chance to stream the #1 documentary of the decade that's still verified hot on Rotten Tomatoes with a 97% audience score. But Daily Wire Plus is the only place you can stream Am I Racist starting October 28th. So if you're not a Daily Wire Plus member, go to dailywire.com/subscribe. Use code DEI for 35% off your new annual memberships right now. Your Daily Wire Plus membership also gets you instant access to uncensored, ad-free daily shows from the most trusted voices in conservative media, live breaking news, and of course, the cultural phenomenon, What is a Woman? Go to dailywire.com/subscribe. Use code DEI for 35% off your new annual membership right now. Now let's get to our daily cancellation. We We spent a fair amount of time on the show recently talking about the Democrat Party's struggles with men, especially white men. I've made my point pretty clear on that topic. But now we have something that proves my point so profoundly that I have no choice but to revisit the subject. Mike Nellis is a former advisor to Kamala Harris, one of the founders of the White Dudes for Harris organization. And on Twitter this week, Mike posted a lengthy analysis and attempted diagnosis of the Democrat Party's man problem. His analysis and the comments in response to it really tell you everything you need to know, but not in the way that they intended. Now, Mike Nellis's post is long. I'm not going to read the whole thing, but I'll read a sizable chunk of it just so you get a sense of where he's going with this. So this is what he says, quote, I've seen a lot of questions about why white men, especially young white men, seem so angry, distrustful of the Democrat Party, or drawn to MAGA-ism. I've been studying this issue for a while now, and I wanted to share some thoughts. If we want to make inroads with white dudes, we need to understand what's happening. First, economic opportunities are shrinking. Young men are struggling with stagnant jobs, stagnant wages, fewer job prospects, making it harder for them to gain independence, start families, or even feel secure in adulthood. That instability makes many susceptible to the MAGA whirlpool. Second, there's a major education gap. Fewer men are graduating from college compared to women, which has serious consequences for their long-term economic and social stability. Kamala Harris is doing well with educated white men, but not with those who didn't finish college. Third, we're facing a mental health and social isolation crisis. Young men are lonelier and struggling with mental health issues at higher rates, partly fueled by social media and the erosion of traditional community institutions. Fourth, there's an identity crisis. Gender roles and societal expectations are shifting, which is a good thing, he says. And young men are left wondering where they fit in. Without positive role models, many gravitate toward toxic figures like Donald Trump, because at least someone's speaking to their frustrations, however inartfully. Fifth, forming relationships, especially romantic ones, has become harder. Lastly, there's a deep cynicism and lack of trust in institutions. Many young men no longer believe the American dream is for them or that they have a place in society that's rapidly changing. We can't keep acting like white men don't have real issues. Everyone is suffering from something, and everyone deserves to have that suffering addressed by their government. Okay, now he goes into detail on all of those points, but that's the summary. And he isn't necessarily fundamentally wrong about any of the individual points that he raises. Yes, it's true. I mean, he's wrong about a lot of what you heard there, but like the initial point, the initial bullet point item, there's truth there. So it's true that men are struggling in this economy. It's true that there's an education gap. It's true that men suffer from loneliness and social isolation. All of that is true. But he's missing a couple of key components. First of all, and most importantly, the why. Okay, so this white dude for Harris is in better shape than most of his leftist counterparts because at least he notices and is willing to acknowledge the hardships that men face. His analysis of the situation seems to go a few steps beyond simply declaring that all men are scum who should be violently eradicated from Earth. And for that reason alone, he already qualifies as the wisest and most insightful Democrat in the country. He's basically Thomas Aquinas by modern Democratic standards, and yet still, he isn't even close to the point because he doesn't know why any of this is happening. There isn't much use in noticing a problem if you don't know why that problem is occurring. If you're driving along and you hear your engine clanging like a church bell, the next step is to take it to a mechanic and to find out why it's making that sound. If you never take the next step, if you never get the problem correctly diagnosed, then you'll be just as screwed as someone who was blissfully unaware of the problem to begin with. So yes, there is an education gap. Women are doing better than men in the education system. Why? Well, because the modern education system is built for girls. It is a system that, from the youngest ages, requires kids to sit calmly at desks for hours a day in classes with dozens of other kids, memorize information, and regurgitate it. This is an environment and a style of education that is better suited for girls, which is why boys are more likely to be diagnosed as mentally disordered and slapped with the ADHD label or some other label and sort of drugged into submission. It's true that men are increasingly socially isolated. Why? Well, because every all-male space in society has been abolished or feminized, which is the same thing as abolishing it. You know, women demanded to be included in everything, in every space, in every boys' club, which means that now there are no more boys' clubs. Even the Boy Scouts is not a boys' club anymore. Even the NFL increasingly caters to women. When you watch football on Sundays, I mean, this is a relatively small example, but every, not just it's not just that they're cutting to Taylor Swift constantly when you're watching it and they're doing, but like every commercial that you watch on TV where they're portraying football fans, it's all, they have women. It's like, you know, they want to, it's a commercial for whatever and for chips or something. And they want to show like your classic football fan. And it's a middle-aged white woman, you know, sitting on the couch, eating the chips and watching the game. And it's like, this is not, yes, there are middle-aged white women who sit on the couch and watch games, but still, this is not actually your classic, that's not really your audience. But they're insisting on it. Like they want to feminize everything. There is nowhere for men to go anymore for fraternity and male bonding. Those places have all been, all of them have been systematically and deliberately eliminated because, in particular, liberal women have said, we want to be involved in everything. We have to be involved in everything. We will not butt out of anything at all. Everything is about us all the time. Okay? That's what happened. It's true that many men are feeling demoralized and angry. Why is that? Well, because our culture intentionally demoralizes them and alienates them and demonizes them. White men in particular have been labeled the villains of history. No group appreciates being scapegoated as the bad guys. White men have tolerated it about as much as you could expect anyone to tolerate it. We've tolerated it far too much, in fact, for far too long. If anything, the real mystery isn't why so few white men vote Democrat, but why any white men would vote Democrat at all. Now, Mike misses these points, and he misses something else too. He's trying to explain why men tend to vote Republican, but never once in his long essay does he ever mention or even consider the possibility that men vote Republican because they happen to agree with the Republican platform, or at least they agree with it more than they agree with the Democrat platform. All of the stuff about men struggling and being demoralized is true, but that's not the primary reason why men vote Democrat. The primary reason is that most men just don't agree with Democrat policies. Now, Mike treats us like we're all a bunch of wayward, lost souls who are hurting and angry and just need someone to give us a hug. Now, that's maybe an improvement over the way the Democrats usually talk about us. Maybe an improvement, but I'm not even sure about that. But it's not true. I don't want a hug from anyone but my wife and kids. I certainly don't want one from a white dude for Harris. As a man, I support Trump because I agree much more with Trump than I do with Kamala Harris. In fact, I disagree with Kamala Harris on literally every point about literally everything. So do most men. That's why we won't vote for her. Men, especially white men, but not only white men, tend to value national sovereignty, law and order, economic freedom, and so on. The Democrat Party stands against all those things, so we don't support them. We aren't lost and confused. Quite the contrary. We know exactly what we believe, and we vote for what we believe. So take me, for example. I'm a man. I support Trump, and yet I don't personally feel isolated or lonely, even though many men do, but I'm blessed because I have a wife and kids and a family that I love, and so I don't have that. I'm not walking around depressed and all that. I didn't go to college, so I guess I technically do count towards the education gap statistic, but I'm also more financially successful than the vast majority of college grads. So I don't even necessarily fit into all that stuff, and yet I'm not going to vote for Kamala. Why? Well, because I have a brain and I have a value system, and both of those things preclude me voting for Kamala. That's why. And this possibility just like doesn't factor in to Mike's analysis at all. And yet his analysis is still the closest to the point that you'll ever see anyone on the left get, which shows just how far away from the point they really are. Case in point, the comments under Mike's post, mostly from his fellow liberals, largely disagree with his points, but not for the reasons that I've outlined, but because he's being too sympathetic to white men. So here's one representative example. This is from a woman named Melissa. Here's what she says. I must admit, I cringed reading most of this. I feel that one thing you didn't address is the systemic entitlement bestowed upon white men in the U.S. That sense of entitlement, that privilege that they felt for eternity, is eroding. And they don't know how to deal with their feelings, which takes us to your point about mental health. Additionally, these issues have plagued men of every race except white men in the U.S. for eternity. I agree that we need to stop ignoring the issues and find ways to face it and attempt to repair it. Unfortunately, I don't know that sending people that MAGA already hates to do Fox interviews is really going to sway the needle on absolutely anything. Okay. So Mike wants to know why Democrats are losing the male vote. Well, here it is. Melissa is why. I mean, not her specifically, but her worldview and everything that it represents. I mean, that's why. She cannot bear to have someone on her own side, even in one Twitter post, just briefly, for a few paragraphs, show anything but contempt for white men. An expression of something other than contempt for white men makes her cringe. Empathy towards this whole group of people makes her cringe. She's sickened by it. Okay? And she represents the majority view on her side. Certainly, she represents the majority view of the Democratic base, which increasingly consists of bitter feminists and nobody else. That's the problem that Mike is trying to grapple with, but he can't actually grapple with it. He can't grapple with it because, like, what he needs to say is to the feminists like Melissa, like, pipe down, okay? But will you just cut it out for 5 seconds so we can try to win some votes over here? That's what he needs to say to the Melissas of his party, but he can't. He cannot say that. He'll never say it. You can't tell the feminists to pipe down in the Democrat Party because they are the Democrat Party. And Mike can't see that, or if he does, he can't say it. So he's close to the point, but a million miles away from it at the same time. And that is why he is ultimately still today, I must say, canceled. That'll do it for the show today. Thanks for watching. Thanks for listening. Have a great day. Talk to you on Monday. Godspeed.
The question everyone in America is asking,
am I racist?
Make those moves.
Get a Daily Wire Plus membership to see Am I Racist?
This is all I have. Did you want to?
I can help you guys out.
Yeah.
Go to amирacist.com and sign up now.
I've been told because I'm a white male, kind of at the top of the pile, how do I get down from the top?
I don't think you necessarily can.
How do we get past all the talk about racism?
We have to love each other.
Well, it can't be that simple. How do we get to a point of racial harmony? It's good to talk to you. We're still on a journey, all of us together.
I think you got some journeying to do.
Just talk to me about the statistics. We have an epidemic.
20 million crimes a year, 6,000, 7,000 hate crimes. No, there's no epidemic.
Why are we talking about statistics? This is not a matter of statistics.
Well, you asked me about the statistics.
Am I Racist? Coming to Daily Wire Plus on October 28th. Rated PG-13.